Have you ever stepped into a room where the air felt heavier than your own breath? Where silence wasn't really silence, but whispers shaped like knives? That's what it felt like that night when I pushed open the tall wooden doors of the school auditorium. The hinges groaned as if warning me not to enter. The faint scent of floor polish mixed with something buttery, popcorn maybe, from the concession stand earlier in the day. Rows of folding chairs stretched out before me, squeaking whenever someone shifted their weight. And above it all, the low hum of voices, blending into one steady vibration, like bees swarming in a hive. I held Sophia's hand. My daughter's fingers were warm but restless, sliding against mine, searching for an anchor. 14 years old, tall for her age, her hair falling over her cheek the way she liked it. Her eyes avoided the crowd, fixed instead on the stage where heavy maroon curtains hung, promising some kind of performance. "Breathe," I whispered to myself. "Smile." But the smile felt stitched on, fragile, like it could tear with the smallest tug. We walked past rows of parents, all settled with their programs. I could feel their eyes. Not directly, no one dared to stare, but I felt it in the way their shoulders angled, in the way their whispers dipped just as I passed. The auditorium wasn't just filled with sound, it was filled with judgment. We found seats near the middle, I like the middle, safe. Not exposed in the front, not hidden in the back. Sophia slid into the chair beside me, her backpack still clutched to her chest like a shield. I adjusted my coat on the empty chair next to me, though I knew no one else would join. And then, as if rehearsed, she appeared. "Tracy, you know the type. The kind of woman who doesn't just walk into a room, she makes the room bend toward her. Perfect hair, lacquered in place, earrings that sparkled when the light hit, perfume that announced her presence 3 rows ahead. She had a confidence so polished it came across as sharp. "Linda," she said, my name crisp like a note played on piano keys. She smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was the kind of smile you wear when you know something others don't. "Tracy." I nodded. My voice steady, though my pulse wasn't. She looked at the chair beside me, then back at me. Her lips curved slightly. "Saving that for someone?" The question could have been innocent. On paper, it was nothing. But her eyes flicked down to the absence she wanted to highlight. My jaw tightened. "For my bag," I said simply. Her smile grew sharper, and then, like an actress delivering her line at the perfect moment, she leaned closer to the woman next to her, lowered her voice just enough to carry across the row, and whispered, "At least my kid has a father. Have you ever been cut open without a knife?" That's what those words felt like. They slid into the air so smoothly that some people almost missed them, but not me, not Sophia, not the handful of parents who stiffened slightly before looking down at their programs. A few chuckled quietly, shoulders shaking. The sound of someone's satisfaction hissed out like a leak in a balloon. I stared at the paper in my hands. The program's black letters blurred until they looked like ants crawling across the page. My chest tightened. Shame surged first, hot and immediate, like a fire under my ribs, but behind it, anger boiled, slow and thick. Beside me, Sophia sat very still. Her knee pressed against mine, rigid, betraying the tension she tried to hide. She didn't look at me, didn't look at Tracy, didn't look anywhere except the stage. But her body trembled faintly, like she was trying to keep herself from shattering. I slipped my hand over hers. She didn't pull away, but her fingers didn't relax either. "What would you do?" "Honestly, if someone cut you down in front of your child, in front of an entire room, would you stand up and shout back? Would you throw her cruelty right back at her? Or would you do what I did? Sit frozen, calculating? Because here's the truth. My instinct wasn't to defend myself. It was to protect Sophia, to decide whether a fight would scar her more than silence. The microphone screeched suddenly as Mr. Kellerman tapped it. "Good evening, everyone." His voice boomed, filling every corner of the room. The spotlight snapped on, casting a blinding white on the stage where the students lined up nervously. People clapped politely, safe applause echoing like hollow rain. The kids shifted in place, tugging at collars, smoothing dresses. But me? I wasn't watching the stage. My eyes were fixed on the back of Tracy's head. Her hair gleamed under the lights, not a strand out of place. She laughed at something her friend muttered, tilting her chin proudly, not sparing me even a glance. She didn't need to. The wound had been delivered. My throat burned. A lump lodged there, but I swallowed it down. I sat taller. I forced my breaths to even out. Beside me, Sophia's grip finally loosened, just a fraction. And in that silence between the principal's next words, I whispered to myself, "Don't let them win." Because cruelty isn't always loud. Sometimes it hides in whispers. Sometimes the deepest wounds come dressed as casual jokes. And if you're not careful, you start to believe them. So I looked at my daughter, her profile lit by the harsh auditorium lights, and I thought, she will not inherit my silence. And now, I turn this question to you. What would you do if someone tried to humiliate you in front of a crowd? There's a kind of silence that doesn't sound empty at all. It's heavy, like a stone pressing down on your chest. That's the silence I felt when I looked to my left and saw the chair beside us, empty, obvious, undeniable. No jacket draped across it, no restless hand tapping against its arm. No father leaning forward with pride, waiting for his child's name to be called. Just an empty seat, cold metal gleaming under the harsh lights of the auditorium. I tried not to look at it, but Sophia did. I saw her eyes flick there, quick at first, like she was checking if maybe, just maybe, something had changed, but nothing had. The seat remained vacant, a reminder louder than any insult. Sophia shifted in her chair. She hugged her backpack tighter. I could feel her breathing faster, shallow, like she was trying to make herself smaller, invisible. She's good at hiding things, too good sometimes, but I'm her mother. I don't just see her, I feel her. And in that moment, I felt the sharp ache she was carrying. Do you know what it's like to watch your child measure themselves against someone who isn't even there? I leaned closer and whispered, "It's just a chair, sweetheart." But she didn't look at me. Her lips pressed tight. Her eyes stayed locked on that space, as if staring at it long enough might conjure someone who should have been there. And then, from 2 rows behind us, came the voice, familiar, cutting Tracy. She let out a sigh, exaggerated, like she was tired of waiting for something obvious. Then her voice, sugar-coated but dripping with venom. "Some people can't even keep a seat warm, can they?" A couple of chuckles followed, soft, cowardly. My spine stiffened. I wanted to turn around, to tell her to shut her mouth, to tell the others they weren't funny. But Sophia's hand gripped my sleeve, tight, desperate. It wasn't just fear. It was plea. A plea not to make it worse, so I stayed silent. And that silence tasted bitter. The lights dimmed a little more as the first group of kids shuffled onto the stage. Parents leaned forward, clapping politely, snapping pictures. And yet, all I could hear was the echo of Tracy's words mixing with the sight of that empty chair. Sophia's fingers finally slipped from my sleeve and curled into her lap. I thought she might cry, but she didn't. Instead, she whispered, so soft I almost missed it. "Why is it always like this, Mom?" Flashback. It hit me instantly. The memory of her at 8 years old, sitting at the kitchen table, crayons scattered, homework half finished. She had asked me then, her little voice breaking the quiet hum of the refrigerator. "Mom, why doesn't Dad ever come? Everyone else's dad comes to the shows. I had no answer. I swallowed the truth, wrapped it in gentler words, told her he was busy, that it didn't mean she wasn't loved. But even then she knew. Kids always know. Back in the auditorium, I blinked hard, pulling myself out of the memory. Sophia's eyes glistened under the lights. She looked older than her years, like the question had carved lines into her spirit. I wanted to hold her, to tell her none of this was her fault, to shout across the room that Tracy's poison didn't define us, but my words stuck in my throat. And then Tracy laughed again, low, smug, like she had won some invisible battle. She leaned toward another parent and whispered, just loud enough for us to hear. That poor girl. No wonder she clings to her mother. Sophia flinched. Her body stiffened. That was the moment my anger turned into something else, resolve. I reached over, gently tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear, and whispered, "You are not less. Do you hear me? Not less. Never less." Her eyes flicked to me for a second, searching my face, searching for strength, and I gave it, even though my own heart felt like it was breaking. You see, an empty chair isn't just an empty chair. To a child, it's a mirror reflecting what's missing. It's the kind of absence that speaks louder than presence. And when someone like Tracy twists that knife, it doesn't just hurt me. It digs into Sophia. I clenched my fists under the armrest, because this wasn't about me anymore. It never was. It was about her, about protecting her from a world that wanted to measure her worth by someone else's failures. So let me ask you, how do you explain to your child that some people choose absence, and that their absence says nothing about her value? There's a kind of laugh that never reaches the eyes. You know it. Tight, contained. It arrives in the mouth like a secret and slices on the way out. That laugh started to ripple through the auditorium row by row. Soft, neat, practiced. I felt it on my skin before I heard it in my ears. Tracy was the conductor. She didn't tap a baton. She tapped the room, a tilt of her chin, a murmur angled over a shoulder, a hand cupped to her friend's ear, not to hide words, but to frame them. When people want to wound politely, they become artists about it. I kept my eyes on the stage. Students in pressed shirts lined up in nervous knots, whispering about cues and lines and whether the mic would squeal. The house lights washed everything in a clean, flat brightness. No shadows to hide in, no corner to duck behind. Every breath I took sounded too loud to me. Maybe you know that feeling, like you're breathing on a microphone no one else can see. "Did you see the sign-ups?" a woman in pearls asked, not quite whispering. Some of us do triple shifts for the fundraiser. Others just show up for the show. "Some people are busy showing up for themselves," Tracy sang back, light as frosting. It must be exhausting. Laughter, soft, obedient. That was the room now, obedient. I could have turned around and said 3 sentences that would have ended the game. I could have named names. I could have listed the hours I volunteered in ways that don't earn plaques. But my daughter's knee brushed my thigh. Tap, tap, a Morse code of don't, I understood. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is hold your tongue so your child doesn't have to hold their breath. On stage, the debate team captain cleared his throat. We learned to respond, not react. He smiled, and the audience smiled back, a reflex. I almost laughed at the irony. Respond, not react. Imagine a world where adults remembered that lesson when the lights aren't on them. Tracy pivoted half an inch in her seat, enough to capture me at the edge of her vision. "Linda," she said. Just my name, like a test. "Did Sophia tell you they're naming the mentorship list tonight? Max is hoping his dad can make it in time. He rearranged flights." A pause, perfectly placed. For Max. It was a kindness weaponized as contrast. He rearranged flights for Max. As if devotion could be measured by boarding passes, as if love inked itself into an itinerary, and that was the only ink that counted. I smiled without showing teeth. I'm sure Max will remember that. Oh, he will, she said. Kids remember who shows up. Do yours? I didn't say it. I thought it. Thinking it made the bitterness fizz at the back of my tongue, I swallowed. Hard. My mother used to tell me bitterness is a drink you pour for yourself. It still burns going down. Have you ever watched a group of people build a story about you while you sit 3 feet away and say nothing? It's like watching your reflection in a funhouse mirror. The more you stare, the less you recognize the outline. But the outline becomes real to them, not you. That's the part that takes your breath. How fast fiction hardens into fact when repeated with the right smile. Pearls leaned in. I do think it's helpful, to have a father's presence. Girls need that for standards. She glanced at Sophia as if she were a case study. I felt Sophia coil next to me, not a flinch, a coil, a drawing in of muscle, a gathering of something she didn't have words for yet. She has standards, I said calmly. She learned them from watching what not to accept. A pause, a real one. The polite kind of cruelty hates plain-spoken sentences. They don't dissolve on the tongue. They sit there and make you chew. Tracy blinked. Not retreat, adjustment. She changed keys. Of course, she purred. Single mothers do so much, truly inspiring. The word inspiring was a glass ornament, all shine, no weight. If you touched it wrong, it shattered. The orchestra of whispers swelled and ebbed around us. Behind me, someone unwrapped a mint with surgical slowness. Crinkle, 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 dragging the sound out like a dare. Farther left, a man cleared his throat in time with a text arriving on his phone. Ding. Pause. Ding. Every small noise seemed to sign its name to the air. That's what happens when you're the subject. The room starts to annotate itself. I anchored myself in details that belonged to me, the way Sophia's hairline curved, the soft freckle under her left eye, the pattern of the stitching on her sleeve, a misshapen X where the machine hiccuped. Small things you can hold on to when the big things try to shove you under. A memory broke the surface without asking permission. Flashback. Fast, bright, unwanted. An autumn carnival in this same gym made into a fairground with streamers and sugar dust. Sophia, 9, standing on tiptoes at the dunk tank, laughing so hard she hiccuped. Tracy ran the prize table then, too. She had corrected my change with a smile that wasn't about math. I had smiled back because the line behind me was long, and my daughter was happy, and somewhere a song I loved was playing, and joy felt bigger than pride. I tucked that memory next to my heart now like a talisman. I can be small, but I am not weak. On stage, the assistant principal announced, "Please welcome our drama troupe for a short scene." Applause. The students shuffled, nervous energy snapping like static. The scene began. A silly sketch about misunderstandings that get out of hand, lines crossed, jokes misheard. A rumor ballooned and popped. I almost snorted. The universe does not do subtle when it's trying to make a point. "Remind you of anyone?" Tracy whispered to Pearls, and they giggled like schoolgirls who'd gotten away with passing a note. There's a moment, always, when cruelty checks for witnesses. If no one objects, it roots deeper. If someone laughs at flowers, I scanned the row. Some faces were blank by design, some were eager. A few looked down. Guilt's favorite pose. I searched for the teacher's eye. She was occupied with the cue list. Of course she was. Adults are busy. Bullies are efficient. A man across the aisle turned his head and met my gaze. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He just held my eyes for a beat too long and then faced forward again. That felt like the truest kindness in the room. No performance, no pity, just a refusal to entertain. Small kindnesses are often silent. I pocketed that look like a coin. Tracy twisted the dial again. "Linda," she said, voice dipped in concern, I do worry about Sophia. The girls in Max's group, they talk. You know how that can go. Mean little rumors, so hard to control once they spread. Another balm stab. Have you thought about counseling? The implication was neat. My daughter as problem. Me as custodian of that problem. Her as benevolent advisor, benevolent only to the extent it performed her goodness. Already have, I said, for me. And let the sentence hang, intentional. Pearls blinked. Tracy laughed. Self-care. Love that for you. The phrase hit my skin like glitter, shiny, impossible to scrub off, and everywhere you don't want it. Self-care as a way to say, take care of yourself, because we won't. You might ask, why keep sitting there? Why not move? Leave? Because leaving is its own headline. Because my daughter was watching, always watching, and I needed her to see what rooted looks like. Sometimes staying seated is more defiant than standing. The kids on stage missed a cue. The audience laughed in that tender way communities do when they forgive children for being human. I wanted to borrow that tenderness and hold it up between us like a shield. Look, see, we can be like this. We know how. A woman 2 seats over, hair tucked in a sleek bun, leaned toward me. Ignore them, she murmured without moving her lips. They're bored. She slid a peppermint into my palm like contraband. I didn't unwrap it. I just held it there, cool and convincing. Proof that goodness existed in small, sugared forms. Tracy saw the exchange and smiled wider. Attention is oxygen. She'd inhale no matter where it came from. Bored? Never. I adore these events. Community is everything. She tossed her hair. The lights caught her earrings. They winked as if they were in on the joke. I found the clock on the back wall and willed its second hand to hurry. It didn't. Time does tricks when you need it to behave. It slows down during paper cuts. It sprints during kisses. Tonight it walked in comfortable shoes and stopped to look at every trophy in the glass case. Sophia's shoulder pressed into mine. Not a lean, more like a brace. Together, we made one steadier body. I laid my hand on her forearm and felt the faint tremor returning. The auditorium's air conditioner kicked on, a low, constant shush, almost like the room was telling us, hush now, hush. Have you ever sat inside a hush and wanted to scream just to prove your voice worked? Max, Pearl said, still watching the stage, is so lucky he has such a strong male role model. It shows... It does, Tracy replied, not whispering now. He's confident. Girls gravitate. Teachers notice. Beat. Doors open. I could have said, doors open when humility knocks, not arrogance. I could have said, luck and love are not synonyms. What I did say was nothing. I counted breaths, in 4s, like we practiced at home when panic tried to rent a room in Sophia's chest. The drama sketch ended. Applause lifted, easy and clean. The kids bowed too low and giggled when they bumped into each other rising. It was charming. It was human. For a moment, even the whisperers allowed themselves to be part of something innocent. Then the lights shifted again, cooler now. The principal returned to the podium with a smile that had learned to be bulletproof. Up next, he said. Recognitions for community support. He shuffled his papers. We're grateful to all who give time, resources, and spirit. I felt Tracy straighten like a spring. She rearranged her posture the way people do before a camera. Pearls dabbed at her lip gloss and pretended not to. A trio nearby adjusted scarves in unison, practiced casual, names were read, a few I recognized, a few I didn't. When Tracy Whitcomb rang across the room, she nodded with a softness that wanted to be seen from the cheap seats. She didn't stand. She didn't need to. Claps arrived on cue, some sincere, some obedient, some confused and clapping anyway because that's what hands do when the room tells them to. Her eyes slid to me as the clapping faded. Not gloating exactly, cataloging, scorekeeping. I pressed the peppermint into my palm harder, felt the edges bite and then soften with the heat of my skin. People will call sugar a comfort. Sometimes it's just proof your hands can still hold. Mom? Sophia's voice was low, close to the floor. Can we go when my part is done? Please? We can, I whispered. If that's what you need? She nodded. A quick, decisive motion. It held more adulthood than I wanted it to. Someone behind us said, "Shame, really?" and let the sentence die there midair, expecting us to finish it. Shame what? Shame who? Shame how? Shame is a boomerang thrown by cowards. It always comes back to the thrower eventually. I didn't have to throw anything tonight. I only had to not catch what wasn't mine. Tracy leaned back again, not toward me now, but past me, as if to include me without including me. "Linda," she said brightly, "if you ever need extra rides for Sophia, Max's dad is always happy to help. He's wonderful with schedules." A generous offer dressed in superiority. The kind you can't refuse without looking ungrateful. I met her eyes. "We manage. I'm sure," she said, and the words were velvet wrapped around a brick. The principal called for a short intermission before the next segment. Chairs groaned, programs rustled, the room exhaled. When crowds stand together, they become a weather system. A small wind moved through the aisles, carrying cologne, the citrus sting of hand sanitizer, the ghost of cafeteria coffee. Tracy rose slowly, giving her dress a small tug that said attention without asking for it. Parents converged on her orbit, compliments, the kind you give when you want to be remembered. She dispensed them back, each one a transaction. That's how some communities work. Praise as currency, approval as savings, rumors as compound interest. Sophia stayed seated. So did I. Staying put can be an act. It was ours. I turned to her. "Do you remember that lighthouse documentary we watched?" I asked softly. She blinked. "The one in Maine?" "Yeah. How the keeper said the light didn't fight storms, it just stayed lit." Sophia nodded. A small breath left her, less jagged now. "I remember. Then we remember that here—" Tracy glanced over at the word "here," as if the word itself could draw a line she hadn't authorized. For a second, I thought I saw something in her eyes that wasn't power, not kindness, not remorse, just a flicker. The human kind that says nothing in a person is only one thing. Then her phone lit up, a name flashed. She smiled to herself and the flicker went out. The mask clicks back easier for some. Intermission ended. The lights dimmed again. The air cooled as if the vents had gotten the memo. Reset. Parents sank into their seats, adjusting sweaters, reclaiming their programs. The room gathered itself like a drawstring bag. The principal's voice rolled out warm and practiced. "As we resume, we ask that conversations pause so our students can shine. Pause your conversations. If only it were that simple. If only words could find a switch and obey." Have you ever sat through a performance knowing the real show was happening 3 inches from your ear? That was tonight. A choreography of glances, a duet of whispers, a chorus of dagger smiles. I looked at the empty space ahead of us where a shadow pooled on the carpet. Stage light, chair leg, geometry of ordinary things. And I made a quiet promise. I will not let this room teach my daughter the wrong lesson about herself. You might be wondering why I'm telling you this in such detail, because details are what bullies count on you to forget. They want their words to blur into a general feeling you can't quite name. If you can't name it, you can't claim it. And if you can't claim it, you can't refuse it. So I am naming it now, line by line, smile by smile. And I'm asking you, yes, you, when the laughs are pretty and the cuts are quiet, do you notice? Do you step in? Or do you look away and call it, not my place? I remember the exact second it happened, The sound in the room had thinned into a low hum, like static before a storm. My eyes kept darting to Sophia, sitting there so stiff, her little hands locked together under the table. Her knuckles had turned white. You know that moment when you're watching someone you love try to hold themselves together, and you can almost feel their breaking point in your own chest? That was me. I saw it coming, and still I wasn't ready. Sophia's lips trembled first, just a tiny flicker, then her eyes glazed over, as if she were no longer seeing the room, but carrying the weight of every whisper, every laugh, every cruel glance that had landed on me, and by extension, on her. And then it happened, the sound that sliced through the suffocating air, her sob. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was raw. It was that kind of cry that comes straight from the gut, the kind you can't hold back even if you bite your tongue until it bleeds. I reached for her instantly, my instinct to shield, to gather, to make her small again so she wouldn't have to face this venomous world. But before my arms could close around her, she whispered. Her voice was so fragile, I almost thought I'd imagined it, but I didn't. I heard it. Clear as glass breaking. Mom, I can't take it anymore. Have you ever heard a child say that? Not about bedtime, not about homework, but about life itself? That whisper was heavier than any scream. It crushed me, and in that moment, time itself seemed to hold its breath. The laughter around us dimmed, like someone had turned down the volume knob. I swear, I could even hear the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Every second stretched so painfully long that it felt like the universe itself wanted to know what I would do next, but I didn't move. I froze, because I knew this wasn't about me anymore. This was about her. Sophia's tears slid silently down her cheeks, and her small shoulders quivered. She wasn't hiding it anymore. She wasn't trying to be brave for me or for herself. She had surrendered to the truth of how deeply this cruelty had cut her. I wanted to tell her, it's okay. We can leave. None of this matters. They don't matter. But the words stuck in my throat. My silence was my only shield, and yet I could see that my silence was also her burden. She turned her face to me, eyes swollen, lashes wet, and that look, oh God, that look, wasn't just pain. It was desperation, a plea. And suddenly, I thought of all the nights she had asked me, Mom, why do people hate us? Why do they laugh at us when we've done nothing wrong? I never had the right answers. I tried to soften the edges, to tell her people were just mean or jealous or ignorant. But what do you say to a child who sees the empty chair at every school recital, who notices when other kids run to their dads after soccer practice while she lingers by the field, holding her backpack like it's the only steady thing in her world? I closed my eyes for just 1 second, and I saw that memory like it was playing on a projector, a flashback. Sophia sitting cross-legged on her bed, hugging her stuffed bunny, whispering, Mom, why isn't Dad here? Why isn't he ever here? I'd given her the only answer I could. Sometimes the people who should show up don't, but that doesn't mean you're not worthy of being loved. I thought it was enough. But watching her now, trembling under the weight of everyone's ridicule, I realized it wasn't enough. Because words can only build so many walls. At some point, the arrows still pierce through, and here she was, pierced, wounded, exposed. I tightened my grip on her hand, just so she knew I was there. My thumb brushed over her skin, damp and hot from her tears. I wanted to pour every ounce of strength I had into that touch, to tell her without words, I've got you. Even if I can't stop the world from being cruel, I will never let you face it alone. But then came the silence, A silence so thick, it felt like the whole room was leaning in, watching, waiting, like they all sensed something was about to break open. And I knew. This was the moment. The hinge, the crack before the flood. Because Sophia's whisper wasn't just a cry for help. It was a signal, a beginning. And as her sobs echoed faintly in the stunned quiet, I realized this story, our story, was about to twist in a way no one in that hall could predict. So let me ask you, what do you think happens when a child who has carried silence for too long finally decides she can't bear it anymore? Pause. Do you hear it? That question isn't just for me, it's for you. Because in that second, Sophia's trembling wasn't weakness. It was the drumbeat before revelation. And as much as it broke me to see her like that, part of me knew something was coming, something no one was ready for. I swear the room had already stopped breathing before Sophia moved. Every eye was on her, her small shoulders hunched, her fingers trembling against the zipper of her backpack. It was such a tiny sound, that scratchy metal sliding open, but in the silence it echoed like thunder. You know how sometimes you can feel a shift in the air before anyone else understands what's happening? That's what this was, a ripple, a premonition. I wanted to stop her. I wanted to whisper, "Baby, don't. You don't have to prove anything to them." But my voice got stuck in my throat. And maybe deep down I knew this wasn't mine to stop. Sophia reached inside, her hand disappearing into the bag she carried every day to school, the bag that usually held pencils and snack wrappers. But this time, it carried something far heavier. She pulled out an envelope, white, folded and slightly crumpled like it had been hidden for too long. My heart lurched into my mouth. Do you know that feeling when you realize your child has been carrying a secret and you weren't even aware? That's the kind of ache that goes deeper than any insult Tracy could ever throw at me. Her little fingers clenched the letter like it was a lifeline. She stood up slowly. Her chair scraped against the linoleum floor, a screech that made the whole room wince. The teacher blinked, confused. Tracy crossed her arms, smirking, probably thinking Sophia was about to run out crying, but no, my daughter didn't run. She stepped forward. Every head turned, following her. This child, who barely spoke above a whisper in class, was now the only sound in the room. She walked right up to the teacher's desk, her hand shaking as she held out the envelope. "This is for you," she said. I could barely breathe. The teacher took it, looking uncertain. She slid a finger under the flap and pulled out the letter. And as soon as I saw the handwriting, my knees nearly buckled. It wasn't Sophia's, it wasn't mine, it was his, Tracy's husband. I knew that script. I had seen it on old holiday cards, on school permission slips, on the checks he used to write. It was undeniable. The teacher cleared her throat and began to read, voice shaking, eyes flicking between Tracy and me. And then the words filled the room, words that scorched through the tension like fire. "Linda, I'm sorry. I know I hurt you in ways I can't take back. The affair was my mistake, not yours. You didn't deserve the whispers, the blame, the judgment. If anyone should carry shame, it's me, and my wife, not you." Gasps. Audible gasps broke around us like glass shattering. Parents leaned forward, mouths open. Chairs creaked as people shifted. I could see Tracy's face drain of color, her mouth opening but no sound coming out. She looked like someone had yanked the ground out from under her feet. The teacher's voice kept going, shaky but relentless, dragging every syllable into the light. "I betrayed my vows. I betrayed you. And I betrayed Sophia, though she didn't deserve any of this. I never had the courage to admit it out loud, but I can't stand by while she carries the weight of our mistakes. Please forgive me. Please know the truth." The room exploded with murmurs. Heads turned, eyes narrowed. Some parents pressed hands to their mouths. Others exchanged wide-eyed glances that screamed, "Did you hear that?" And me? I sat frozen, my palms flat against the table, my pulse roaring in my ears. I should have felt humiliated, but I didn't. I felt relief. For once, the truth wasn't mine to prove. It wasn't my word against Tracy's smirk. It was right there, in black ink. In her husband's own hand, I looked at Sophia, my brave, trembling girl. And I swear I saw steel in her spine that hadn't been there before. She had done what I couldn't. She had taken the silence and cracked it open for everyone to hear. And maybe you're wondering, why now? Why this moment? Why risk it? Because when cruelty piles up, when shame is forced on the wrong shoulders, sometimes even a child knows the only way out is to let the truth speak for itself. Tracy sputtered then. "That's not... he didn't..." But the letter was still in the teacher's hand, the signature undeniable. And suddenly, the room that had once laughed at me now laughed at her. Only this time it wasn't laughter filled with malice. It was disbelief, shock, judgment, but not aimed at me. For the first time, the spotlight shifted, and Tracy was the one standing under it. I didn't move, I didn't gloat, I didn't need to. The truth had already done what I never could. And I want you to ask yourself, what would you have felt in that moment? Relief? Justice? A bitter kind of satisfaction? Or maybe the deep, shaking kind of breath that comes when you realize you've survived the worst storm and the sky is finally cracking open? Because that's exactly what it felt like. This wasn't revenge, this was revelation. And it was only the beginning. So let me leave you with this question before we go further. What do you think Tracy will do now that the mask has been ripped off in front of everyone? The envelope was still in the teacher's hand when the first ripple broke. Not a shout, not a gasp, a whisper. Soft, hungry, contagious. It started at the edges of the room like wind catching the tips of grass and moved inward, row by row, until it pressed against my skin. Did you hear? No, it says, her husband? Tracy's? Wait, what? You don't realize how loud whispers are until the whole room starts using them. Paper programs rustled like wings, chair legs scraped. A phone vibrated, then another, then a third, rattling on laminated wood like a trapped insect. The teacher looked down at the letter again, blinked twice as if her eyes could refuse the ink, and swallowed. "Everyone, let's take a moment," she said. Her voice tried for calm and landed on fragile. She folded the letter once, then again, as if smaller paper would make a smaller truth. It didn't. Tracy stood. It wasn't graceful. The legs of her chair snagged, metal squealed. Her bracelets chimed a nervous little song. "This is ridiculous," she announced, but her throat thinned the word ridiculous to something tight and airless. "It's fake." "The signature?" someone asked, not kindly. "That handwriting," another murmured. "Looks like..." "Stop." Tracy shot the teacher a look that had worked 100 times before. It didn't work now. The teacher's fingers tightened on the page. The room had shifted, slightly, decisively, like a jury leaning forward for closing arguments. Behind me, I always wondered. Beside me, he's never at. Across the aisle, remember that fundraiser? Over my shoulder, she made it sound like snippets, cut-ins. Nothing complete, everything pointed. The auditorium had become a radio scanning stations, catching half phrases as the dial passed. Static, voice, static, voice. Sophia didn't move. Her hands were flat on her knees, tremor gone, breath even. She watched the air, not the people, as if she could see the current itself changing direction. I wanted to put my arm around her, I didn't. The space around her felt sacred now, the kind you don't step into without permission. "Give me that," Tracy said, and reached for the letter. The teacher pulled it back, almost surprised at herself, as if her own hand had made a choice before her brain did. "I can't," the teacher said softly. "It's a student record now, a flimsy sentence on its surface. A steel one underneath." The room caught it. A few heads nodded, lawyers of their own lives suddenly. Tracy turned, slow as a pivot in high heels on a slick floor. Her gaze landed on me and slid off like water on glass. "You," she started and stopped. The "you" stranded, heavy. "You planned this." "I didn't," I said, and my voice surprised me by being simple. "I didn't even know." "Liar," someone hissed, but it wasn't aimed at me. The word flew past my shoulder like a paper airplane and landed on the person it had always belonged to. You might expect satisfaction to be bright. It isn't. It's pale. Cool. Like stepping out of a stuffy room into evening air. That's what this moment felt like. Air. A man in the back cleared his throat, not to speak, but to decide if he should. He didn't. Another parent did. "Tracy," she said, careful, neighborly, the way people speak before they choose a side. "Is it true?" Tracy's mouth opened, closed. The jewelry at her wrists made winter noises. He must have been manipulated," she said. A vague bracket at me, filled with old rumors. "She's been trying to what?" It was out before I could leash it. Not anger, accuracy. "To be quiet enough for you to feel loud?" The whispers swelled. Someone drew a breath like a string being pulled taut. "Okay," the principal said, appearing at the edge of the stage with a smile that had earned hazard pay. "Let's, refocus on the evening's program." "Refocus on what?" a father asked. "We just learned the program's MC has been—" He stopped, choosing a word that wouldn't make the school board meeting minutes. "Misleading people." The teacher lifted the letter as proof that spoke without a microphone. The lights carved white rectangles in the paper. The ink shimmered slightly where a tear had fallen. Hers, mine, I don't know. Phones were out now. Screens glowed in laps like small, accusing moons. Someone typed, quick thumbs, then sucked in a breath as the 3 dots appeared on her chat. "Did you hear? OMG. Is it true?" Finally. The whisper spread faster than sound. Text. "Please," the principal said, voice cracked just at the edge. "This isn't—" "Court?" someone said. "It feels like court." It did. A courtroom without a judge, only a jury of neighbors who had spent years pretending not to notice the way power rearranged furniture. Tracy's friend, Pearls, stood up too quickly and knocked her purse to the floor. Lipstick rolled, red as a warning. "Everyone is overreacting," she said, bending to gather herself. "We don't know context." "The context," a mother said, steady, "is that she made a sport of humiliating a child and her mother." And now the ball rolled back. The room made a sound then, a low, unanimous mum, not agreement exactly, recognition. Something shared, the way a congregation sometimes hums at a truth. I realized my hands were fists. I opened them. The lines in my palms were damp, like maps after rain. I wiped them on my skirt and felt the rough nap of the fabric ground me. I was still here. I hadn't disappeared, no matter how many times the room had pretended I had. "Mom?" Sophia's voice was a thread. I bent my head the smallest angle toward her to show I had it in my hands. "You okay?" she asked. "Yes," I said, a word that tasted like water. "You?" She nodded once. The movement contained an answer deeper than the nod. "I'm not sorry." On stage, a boy in a blazer whispered to a girl in a dress, and the girl's eyes widened beautifully the way theater kids' eyes do when drama leaks off stage and they're suddenly living it. A bass from the sound system thumped once. Feedback or heartbeat? I couldn't tell. Tracy took a step toward the center aisle as if a spotlight might find her there and correct the narrative by muscle memory. It didn't. The light didn't care who she was. It cared about angles and objects and wattage. Power had migrated, quietly, like cats, and now sat in other laps, under other hands. "Sit down," a voice said from somewhere behind her, not unkind. She didn't. Stubbornness held her upright. Dignity had already slipped. The principal tried again. "Out of respect for the students—" "Respect?" The father from earlier laughed once, short. That would have been nice when a woman was being cut to pieces with compliments. The word compliments drew its own whisper as it passed. The particular horror of a cruelty that wears the right perfume. Enough! Tracy's voice cracked, then rallied. "Think about the children," she said, as if the invocation could rewind everything to the moment before the letter met air. She flung a hand toward Sophia without looking at her. "Think about what this is doing to her." Sophia turned her head then, slow, measured. Her eyes met Tracy's and did not blink. "It's doing less than what you did," she said. No tremor, no apology, just a sentence shaped to fit a fact. The whisper became an exhale. If truth had sound, it would be that. You know those seconds when a whole room silently reassigns its sympathies? You can't see the paperwork, but you feel the signatures. That happened. The temperature changed. People sat back differently. Some who had been leaning into Tracy's orbit now angled their knees away. It doesn't take much to redraw a map. Sometimes it takes a teenage girl saying exactly one true sentence. "I think," the teacher said carefully, authority finding her spine, "we should pause for 5 minutes." She held the letter slightly higher, not as a threat, as a premise. "No phones, please." The please carried a parent's weight. A few screens dimmed, half guilty. The murmuring didn't stop. It changed shape. Fragments drifted like captions. "Always knew something didn't add up." She was so performative. "Remember the bake sale ban? Her husband, though. Poor kid." "Poor kids," another corrected, pluralizing compassion, expanding the circle. Tracy sank a fraction, not sitting exactly, losing height in other ways. "He'll deny it," she said to no one and everyone. "He will." Her certainty came out dented. "Maybe," I said, because I wasn't interested in pretending grace is the same as silence. "But he can't deny the way you treated us." She flinched, not at me, at the past, rushing in without knocking. A custodian in the side aisle froze with a trash picker midair. A candy wrapper hovered at its claw. He looked like a question mark. We all did. The principal conferred with the teacher in whispers not meant for theater. Their mouths moved in the choreography of crisis management. We'll table awards. We'll email parents. We'll follow up. We need policy. My ears translated out of habit. Systems speak sounds the same in every building. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said finally, returning to the mic, "we need a brief recess. Students, stay with your groups. Parents, please remain seated." He looked at me for the first time all evening, not through me, at me. There was a sorry in it without the word. I accepted it, and not because he'd earned it, but because I was done holding other people's worst moments in my hands. A flock of murmurs lifted again, took a lap of the room, and settled. The sound of 100 people deciding what they'd say in the car later. The sound of narratives cooling into stories. The sound of change, if you're optimistic. The sound of regrouping, if you're not. Sophia let out a breath I hadn't realized she'd been saving. I matched mine to hers, 2 metronomes finding the same beat. For the first time that night, my shoulders dropped, a tiny surrender to gravity. It felt like telling the truth to my own body. We are safe enough to rest, for now. Do you want to know the strangest part? I didn't feel triumphant. I felt sober. Not like a party ending, like a spell lifting. A room that had been enchanted by a particular story, Tracy's story of who belongs and who pretends, had blinked, rubbed its eyes, and looked again. And what did it see? It saw a woman who'd been too loud about her goodness and too quiet about her harm. It saw a child who'd carried adult silence until it cracked like ice. It saw me, not as a cautionary tale, but as a person who had outlasted a long, small war. "Hey," whispered the woman with the sleek bun, the peppermint conspirator from earlier. She slid closer, not touching. "If you need a ride after, I'm parked close." A practical kindness. My throat tightened in that grateful way that embarrasses you later. "Thank you," I said. She nodded like we'd agreed on something larger than logistics. Tracy's phone lit up on the chair. She snatched it, glanced, and her mouth pulled left. Whatever message she'd hoped for, it wasn't that one. For a second, her face was unarmored. Not villain, not queen, human. The flicker almost made me step toward compassion. Almost. Compassion is not a door you owe to someone who keeps slamming it in other people's faces. It's a gate you can open when the weather changes. Tonight, it was still raining. The teacher folded the letter a final time and slid it into a manila envelope that looked suddenly too thin for what it carried. She wrote something on the tab in tidy blue pen. "Classification is comfort." I envied her that small control. The whispers settled into a low, workable hum, the sound of people preparing to pretend civility again. The auditorium had the decency to feel ashamed of itself. Buildings do that sometimes. After they've been witnesses, I turned to Sophia. Her eyes were glass clear, not dry. Clear. "We're okay," I said. "We're okay," she repeated, a call and response we didn't know we were rehearsing for years. "And you, listening to this, feeling the room in your own chest, answer me honestly. When truth finally cuts through the noise, do you help it carry the room, or do you help the room forget?" There's a particular quiet that comes right before something breaks. Not silence. No, silence is clean. This was crowded, tight. You could hear the breath in it. The aftertaste of shock. The letter had already done its work, and the room knew it. Even the lights seemed to understand and held steady like they didn't want to miss the moment. Tracy tried to stand taller. She tugged at her dress as if straight fabric could straighten a story. Her face, porcelain most days, had a hairline crack running down the middle now. You couldn't see it if you looked at her head on. You had to look at the edges. The twitch at her eye, the way she pressed her tongue against her molar, buying time that had already been sold. "Everyone, please," the principal said, palms open, voice warm with a panic he had learned to disguise. "Let's be respectful. Respectful." That word landed wrong in my body. Respect is what I had been paying at full price for years while Tracy got the discount. And now here we were, with the receipt. Tracy reached for the letter again. She didn't grab. She posed the gesture like a photograph. "I'd like to see that." The teacher didn't move. Tracy's hand hovered in the air, fingers tightening into a reluctant fist, then relaxing as if she remembered how hands are supposed to look. "It's private," the teacher said, voice small but refusing to step back. "It involves a student." She glanced at Sophia and then at me, and in that glance was a whole apology for all the times she hadn't seen what was right in front of her. I didn't need the apology. I needed this moment to stand. Tracy laughed. It wasn't a laugh. It was a cough in a dress. "A letter can say anything. People forge things." She searched the room for agreement like a hostess looking for her coat at the end of a party. No one handed it to her. A father in a baseball cap leaned forward. That's his handwriting, simple, undressed. You could feel the sentence land, thud, on the tile. Pearls, suddenly dimmer without Tracy's electricity, tried to rally. Context matters, she said. The way people say weather matters when the tornado is already in your yard. We don't know what... I know what he wrote, another mother cut in, eyes on the paper like it was a live animal. And I know how she talks. She tilted her chin toward me without looking away. We let it slide because she made it pretty. Tracy's head snapped toward her. Excuse me? You heard me. The principal lifted the mic, then set it down again. A good man in a bad moment. A bad system in a good gym. I wasn't keeping score anymore. I was observing. That's what survival does to you after a while. You catalog. You stop negotiating with hope and start noticing what's true. Sophia's hand slipped into mine. Warm, dry now. Stronger than it had been 15 minutes ago. The tremor had left her body and settled somewhere else, maybe in Tracy's. I could see it in the bracelets. They were tiny bells for a nervous system. I will be talking to my attorney, Tracy announced, and the words sounded like a costume. Expensive, heavy, and not designed for running. This is defamation. You know what I wanted to say? I wanted to ask her if she knew the word she needed wasn't defamation, it was confession. But the room didn't need another line from me. The room needed the weight of its own seeing. Tracy. It was the peppermint woman, calm, precise. The letter is signed by your husband. There are apps, Tracy snapped. People make AI write things that sound like, it's his handwriting, Cap repeated, slower, as if teaching a skittish horse how to be touched. She pivoted to me then, and there it was. The look I'd learned to recognize as the start of violence in a place that calls itself civilized. The look that says, you broke the rules by not playing my game. Her mouth made a shape around my name and then swallowed it. What did you do? She asked. I could have said nothing. I could have said everything. Instead, I said the smallest true thing. We told the truth. Her laugh failed again. You think you're a victim, don't you? You think... She flung an arm at the rose. You think these people care about you. They don't. They will forget you. They always forget the weak ones. I felt Sophia inhale beside me. That sentence landed on her first. I moved my body 2 inches and caught it second. We're not weak, I said quietly. But the room was tuned to our frequency now, and quiet traveled. Tracy took a step down the aisle, heels catching in the seam of the runner. She didn't fall. Not yet. But the stumble made her glance drop, and in that drop, the mask slid. I saw a flash of something underneath. Fear? Grief? It flickered like a light bulb right before it goes. If I weren't the person she had chosen to bruise, I might have felt sorry for that flicker. Not enough to forgive her, enough to understand she was human. Humans can do monstrous things with human hands. Max's dad will, she began, and then her phone buzzed. She looked down. The flicker died. Whatever message she'd been waiting for didn't arrive. Or it did. And it said the thing you never want your phone to say when your life is a stage. Not now. The principal tried again. Let's close this for tonight, he said, as if closing were a thing you could do to a truth once it was opened. We'll reconvene next week. Close it, a mother echoed, disbelief turning the word into a mirror. Close it when a child just had to prove what we refused to see? Somewhere a student coughed. The sound ricocheted off the back wall. The banner about excellence fluttered in the school's old air conditioning, like it agreed with whoever was winning. You made fun of me, Sophia said. Not loud, not dramatic, honest. She didn't stand. She didn't need to. Her voice stood up for her. You said I cling to my mom. You said I don't have a father. She looked at Tracy, held her. You knew why. And you said it anyway. Tracy didn't flinch this time. She stiffened. I didn't know, she said, and her mouth betrayed her with a tremble on the last word. No. You knew enough, Sophia said. You knew enough to want it to hurt." The room exhaled. If truth could be measured, that one cleared the meter. Pearls sat down without meaning to. Her knees misunderstood the moment and bent. The father with the cap took it off now, fingers worrying the brim while he stared at the stage like it might offer better script choices. The teacher stepped closer to our row. "Sophia," she said, voice going careful again. "Thank you for speaking." That sentence cracked something in me I didn't realize was still brittle. "Thank you for speaking," as if courage were a community service and not a tax we pay when the city refuses to pave the road. Tracy's breath went shallow. You could see it in her collarbones, small wings struggling under skin. "This isn't fair," she said. "You're all ganging up on me because I wanted standards." "Standards?" the peppermint woman repeated, letting the word sit between her teeth for a beat before handing it back. "Mean kindness where we can, boundaries where we must, accountability when harm is done." "Who made you the judge?" Tracy snapped. "No one," she said. "That's the point." She gestured around. "We were all jurors even when we pretended we weren't." The principal's smile finally cracked. He was out of moves. "Tracy, please," he said. The please sounded like a tired chair. "For the students?" "For the students," Tracy echoed, and then her voice broke on the plural like a shoelace snapping. "For my son," she said to the room, to herself, to the ceiling tiles, to the phone in her hand. He shouldn't see." She stopped, wiped at nothing, a dull thud. Her purse slid off the chair and hit the floor. Lipstick again, like a repeat of a mistake. A mascara tube rolled, bumped my shoe, and lay there. I slid it back with the side of my foot. Not cruelty, not kindness, geography. I could feel the old script rising in me, the one where I make it easier for everyone by making myself smaller. I almost whispered, "It's okay," to the room, to her, to the story. But the words died before they reached my mouth. Healing is not the same as smoothing. Forgiveness is not the same as forgetting. And mercy, when offered too early, becomes enabling. "Tracy," I said, and she looked at me like I'd said her true name. "It doesn't have to be this way." Her laugh came back wrong. "What way is that?" "The way where you double down on harm because you're afraid of the size of your own shadow." My voice stayed even, not a sermon, a sentence. She swallowed. Her throat worked like it was lifting something heavy. "I never meant—" "I believe you meant to win," I said. "And sometimes in that game, people become trophies or targets." She looked away first, at the floor, at the chair, at the letter in the manila envelope in the teacher's hand like it was a wild animal you might coax back into a cage if you just whispered to it sweetly enough. From the stage, a kid accidentally knocked a mic stand. The boom sent a skinny sound across the room. Everyone flinched a little. It felt like the world reminding us, "You're alive. You can still jump. You can still choose." Tracy's shoulders fell a fraction, not surrender, sag. It was the tiny gravity of a story losing its helium. "I'm going," she said, to no one and everyone. "Max will need me." She said it like a charm she could braid into her hair, a talisman you wear when the crowd turns. The peppermint woman stood, not in blockade, just in place. "Leave if you need to," she said, "but don't rewrite this in the parking lot." "I don't rewrite," Tracy hissed. "You've been writing since you walked in," Cap murmured. "Different genre tonight is all." Tracy took a step. "Another." The aisle became a runway with no cheer at the end. People changed the angle of their legs to let her pass. A few pulled their knees in late on purpose. The petty theater of it might have satisfied me once. Tonight it made me tired. Whatever show we were in, I was ready for the curtain call. She was beside me now. For the first time all evening, she looked directly into my face and didn't look away. Not a glare, an inventory, checking for pity, testing for triumph. I offered neither. It surprised her. "I'm not who you say I am," she said. "I'm not who you said I was," I answered. We stood there, 2 sentences facing each other, and then she went on. "Past the father in the cap, past the peppermint woman, past a row of kids in black dress shoes they'd borrowed from cousins, past the exit sign that cast its red blessing and then swallowed her into the hallway, the door closed. The sound it made was not loud, but it echoed. Something eased in the room. Shoulders lowered, throats cleared, programs folded. The principal whispered with the teacher again and then moved to the mic. "We'll conclude for tonight," he said, finally choosing a script with fewer lines. "Students, thank you for your patience, parents." He looked at me once more. I nodded. He nodded back. An agreement found late is still an agreement. The custodian resumed his route. The candy wrapper that had waited on his picker all this time was delivered to the bag with the relief of a duty finally done. The banners stopped fluttering as the AC cycled off. For a brief, unreal second, the auditorium felt like a church after a hard sermon. No hallelujahs, no altar call, just quiet people looking at themselves. Sophia squeezed my fingers. "Mom?" "Yes, I need air." We stood. One body, 2 shadows on the aisle runner. People moved their knees, they made room. Not because we demanded it, because the story demanded it, and they had finally remembered how to be in a story without being the villain or the chorus. As we reached the back, the peppermint woman caught my eye. She didn't smile. She just gave a small nod that meant something like, "I saw," and "I'm still seeing." Sometimes that's enough. Outside the doors, the hall felt cooler, cleaner, less authored. The vending machine hummed an ordinary song. The trophy case reflected us back, warped a little, like trophy cases always do, but recognizable, alive, ourselves again. We didn't speak for a handful of breaths. Then Sophia said, "I'm not shaking anymore." "I know," I said. "Me neither." I had imagined this moment 100 ways. In most of them, I was throwing a line like a winner, something sharp, something that would rewind every humiliation with interest. But real life is quieter. The victory I wanted to taste like sugar tasted like water instead, clear, necessary, without edge. Maybe that's what justice feels like when your hands are finally empty. And you, if you've stayed with me this far, answer me straight. When a mask falls in a room you share, do you notice the face? Or do you rush to help the mask back on? Outside the auditorium, the hallway felt cooler, like the building had finally remembered how to breathe. The vending machine hummed its tired little song, and the trophy case threw our reflections back at us, wavy, imperfect, but still us. Sophia stood in front of me, eyes rimmed pink, shoulders squared like someone trying to stand on a boat. I could see the storm in her, still moving, still loud. "Come here," I said, and my voice was softer than I expected. It didn't wobble. It didn't need to be bigger than the moment. It just needed to be real. She came into my arms like a decision. Not a collapse, not a rescue, an arrival. Her face pressed into my shoulder, hot and damp. I felt her breath stutter and then even out, like a metronome finding its click again. You know that feeling when your body remembers safety before your mind does? That's what it felt like. Her fingers gathered the fabric at my back until it creased. My hands cupped the back of her head, thumb in her hairline, the way I used to when she was small and storms were just weather. "I'm here," I whispered. "I'm right here." I said it twice because sometimes the second one catches what the first one misses. People moved past us, the long sigh of a crowd dispersing. A mother with a program pressed to her chest gave us a look that was almost a bow. A teacher hurried by with a stack of papers hugged tight like she'd finally learned where to put her hands. The peppermint woman lingered 5 steps away, not intruding, a sentinel in good shoes. I nodded once and she nodded back, an exchange of tiny flags. Safe, safe. Sophia's breath warmed my skin. "Did I make everything worse?" she asked into my shoulder, voice so small it almost stayed there. "No," I said, and I felt the word move from my throat into her hair. "You didn't do anything wrong. You told the truth. Have you ever noticed how truth sits lighter than lies once it's out? People say truth is heavy, but that's only because we carry it alone for so long. Shared, it's lighter." That's what I felt then. The lift of something set down. I leaned back just enough to see her face. Her lashes clumped from tears, black beads at the ends like punctuation. I wiped one cheek with my thumb. "You were brave," I said. "I didn't say too brave for your age. Courage doesn't check a birth certificate." Her mouth trembled, not the trembling of before, a gentler kind, like the aftershock of a wave. Everyone was staring. "I know," I said, but they were finally seeing. She looked past me at the door to the auditorium, the heavy metal kind with a small wired window that shows you a movie with no sound. "Do you think she hates me?" I considered the truth and the usefulness of the truth and chose the piece that would hold. "I think she hates losing," I said. "And you took away the only script she knows?" A soft laugh, hers, mine, I couldn't tell, slipped into the space between us, not humor, release. I felt her shoulders settle a fraction lower. That's how healing begins, in half inches. We slid down the wall together until we were sitting on the cool linoleum, backs pressed to cinder block, legs stretched out like sailors who found dock. It felt rebellious to sit there, almost tender. The fluorescent lights hummed above us, softer in the hall than in the room. My knee brushed hers, a small contact that said we without having to define it. "Do you remember the first recital?" I asked, the flashback rising without effort. "Pattern interrupt?" "Yes, but also a bridge." "When you were in the ladybug costume and the antenna kept falling over your eye?" She snorted, that unguarded kid laugh that pops the top off sadness. "Everyone clapped because I waved at the wrong time. And afterward," I said, smiling, "you asked me if the wrong wave ruined the whole show. What did you say?" "I said a show can survive a wrong wave." I tipped my head toward the auditorium. "Turns out, so can we." We let that sit a while, the hallway holding it for us. Down the corridor, a drinking fountain pinged every few seconds like it had a slow leak. The sound made time simple again. I stroked her hair with my palm, slow, the way you smooth fabric you care about. "Listen," I said. "You don't owe anyone silence, not me, not them, not ever. If something is hurting you, you get to say so." Her eyes searched mine. "You know the look kids give you when they're recalibrating who you are? That look, even if it makes people mad?" "Especially then," I said, and I meant it in the plainest way, not as a dare, as a boundary. We don't buy peace with our own bruises. She reached for my hand, turned it face up, traced the lines there with a fingertip like she was learning a map. "I was scared," she said. "Me too," I admitted, and the admission cost me nothing. But scared isn't the same as wrong. We sat like that, letting the world shrink to hands and breath and the friendly hum of a soda machine. Footsteps came and went. A poster for the school play flapped at one corner, the tape giving up its fight. I leaned forward and pressed it flat. I don't know why that felt important. Maybe I wanted one thing, just one, to stay where it was supposed to. Behind the door, I could still feel the social math. All those adults recalculating the equations they'd been using to justify their laughter. It didn't pull me back in like it usually does. The hall was a border we had crossed and for once did not need to patrol. "Mom," she said after a while, voice steadier, "what if people think I was cruel?" "Do you?" I asked. She shook her head. I felt tired. "That's not cruelty," I said. "That's truth with its shoes off." She smiled, slow, like the word picture was a sunrise. "You're weird." "Thank you," I said. "Compliments know their way home." Her phone buzzed, face down on her thigh. She didn't pick it up, neither did I. Let the outside world wait in its little rectangle. We were doing life at full size. "Can I ask you something?" I said. She nodded. "How did you get the letter?" My voice stayed gentle. I wasn't fishing for drama. I just wanted to understand the road she'd walked to get to this hall. She pressed her tongue to her cheek, thinking. "He gave it to me," she said. "At the grocery store." The picture formed instantly. The blameless aisles, the cold breath of the dairy case, the way a person can hide a sin between boxes of cereal. When? A week ago. Her brows pinched, apology pulling at the expression. "He said it was for you, but it should be my choice when to give it." The anger that rose was clean, not sticky. How convenient for him to outsource courage to a child. But I didn't pour that anger onto her. "You chose tonight," I said. "That was your choice." "I'm proud of your choice." She looked startled, like she'd expected me to scold her for waiting or for acting at all. "Really?" "Really," I said. "You didn't throw it like a weapon. You offered it like a key." She leaned her head on my shoulder again, and the crown of her hair found the hollow at my collarbone where it has always fit. She has been fitting there since she was small enough to disappear into a towel. Bodies remember. A door opened down the hall. The principal stepped out, spotted us, and stopped. He raised a hand in a shy wave that read like a question. "Okay?" I gave him a small nod that answered enough without forgiving everything. He moved on, his footsteps careful, like walking near a nest. "I used to think," Sophia said, "that if I was quiet enough, people would leave us alone." My throat tightened at the ghost of that belief. "I used to think that too," I said. "Turns out quiet didn't protect us. It only made us easier to target." She considered that, rolling it around in her mind the way you roll a smooth stone between your fingers. "So what protects us?" "Us," I said. "Being on our own side." I squeezed her hand. "And people who know the difference between kindness and performance?" She smiled a little at that. Kindness versus performance, like she'd discovered a new category in the world and wanted to keep it. "The peppermint lady," she said. "Yeah," I said. "The peppermint lady." A text came through on my phone, then another. The group threads had woken up. "Are you okay?" "Proud of you." I'm sorry I didn't say anything before. The apologies felt like small bandages handed too late. I could use them or not. I decided to pocket them for later. Tonight wasn't for managing other people's penance. Tonight was for this, our circle of two. Sophia lifted her face. The pink had faded to a calmer color. "Can we go home?" she asked. "In a minute," I said. "Let's let this moment finish itself." She nodded as if moments had their own clocks, and she wanted to honor the second hand. We watched a custodian push a rattling cart toward the far stairwell, a slow and steady procession. The ordinary tried to reassert itself all around us. I let it. Ordinary is how you know you're alive. I brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "Do you want to hear what I'm most proud of?" She looked wary. "Is it going to be something cheesy?" "Absolutely," I said. "I'm a mom." She rolled her eyes, a right older than language, but she smiled anyway. "Okay, I'm proud," I said, "that you chose truth without choosing cruelty. You didn't shout, you didn't stab. You just opened the door and let the air in." Her eyes watered again, not with the blistering salt of earlier, but with that clean kind that washes instead of burns. "It still hurts," she said. "Hurting doesn't mean you did it wrong," I said. "It means you're human." She took that in. "You could watch the way certain sentences land and then start to grow roots." "Is it going to hurt tomorrow?" "Probably," I said. "But hurt changes shape when you don't carry it alone." We fell into a quiet that wasn't empty. It had a pulse. If you've ever sat with someone in a hospital waiting room and said nothing but said everything, you know the kind. The hallway carried our silence better than the auditorium carried those whispers. The hall held it like a bowl holds water. I kissed the top of her head. "One more thing," I said. "Promise me something." She made a face. "Depends." "Promise me," I said, "that when people try to hand you shame that doesn't belong to you, you'll look for the name on the package." She laughed. "And return to sender?" "Exactly." She extended her pinky, childhood right there in the gesture, and I hooked mine around it. A contract, binding as law. "Return to sender," she said, solemn, then giggled at her own ceremony. The auditorium door opened again. Parents started to spill into the hall, quieter than they'd entered, like the building had taught them something. A few smiled at us, tentative, as if we were a new species they didn't want to startle. I didn't perform for them. I didn't shrink from them. I stayed where I was, holding my girl, belonging to my own life. The peppermint woman approached. "Do you need a ride?" she asked softly. "We're okay," I said, and this time the words were effortless, because they were true on their own feet. "Thank you. Good," she said. "Good." She hesitated, then added, "If anyone says anything unkind online tonight, tell me." The edge in her voice was protective, not performative. "We will," I said, knowing we probably wouldn't, but warmed by the offer anyway. After she left, I looked at Sophia. "Ready?" "Ready," she said, and stood. We straightened our clothes, the human ritual of re-entering, and walked back toward the doors together. The trophy case caught us again, this time less distorted. We didn't look like people who had conquered a room. We looked like people who had outlived one. I'll take it. As my hand closed over the push bar, I paused, not for effect, not for drama, for gratitude, for the old us who would have swallowed the night whole and pretended it tasted fine, for the new us who had learned to taste what was real and spit out what wasn't. I glanced at you, the you on the other side of the screen, the you who's been holding your breath with us, and asked, because I mean it. When someone you love shakes in a storm, do you rush to fix the sky, or do you choose to be the shelter? If you've ever chosen shelter, you know it's not smaller, it's braver. We stepped into the evening. The air was cool, the parking lot buzzing with delicate conversation, car doors opening and closing like soft punctuation. I put my arm around Sophia and felt her lean into me like a sentence finds its period. For all the noise the night had made, this was the sound I wanted to end on. Two hearts, side by side, choosing the same pace. You did nothing wrong, I said once more, because some truths deserve a chorus. I told the truth, she said back, and I heard strength in it now, not volume, strength. We crossed the asphalt together. Behind us, the building exhaled. Ahead of us, the shape of home waited, ordinary and luminous. I unlocked the car, and she slid in, backpack first, that same backpack that had carried a letter and the beginning of our relief. I took one last look at the auditorium doors and let them be just doors again. On the drive home, the sky wasn't dramatic. No lightning, no cinematic downpour to underline the night. The clouds were thin and undecided, the kind that let a few polite stars show through. Streetlights made tidy puddles on the asphalt. The wipers moved once on a dry windshield, then remembered themselves and stopped. I took comfort in the ordinary. Sometimes normal is the bravest place you can stand. Sophia leaned her head against the window and watched our neighborhood slide by, porches with wind chimes, a bicycle left on its side like a sleeping animal, a dog in a yard practicing diplomacy with a squirrel. She was quiet, but it wasn't the smallness of earlier. It felt like a fullness waiting for language. At a red light, she spoke, "What happens now?" The light changed, and we rolled forward. "Now," I said, keeping my voice steady as the road, "we decide what's ours to carry and what's not. Boundaries, she said, testing the word like a new pair of shoes. Boundaries, I nodded. Lines that tell the truth about what we will and won't allow. We turned onto our street. Our porch light, on its own timer, glowed like a warm answer. When we stepped inside, the house greeted us with the comfortable smell of laundry and old books. No performance, no audience. I set my keys in the bowl and exhaled a breath that felt like it had been waiting all evening for its turn. Sophia went to fill the kettle. I noticed the way her hands moved, steady now, not the tremble of a couple hours ago. When the water began to hum, I pulled a notebook from the drawer, not the pretty one with embossed flowers, the plain legal pad with a coffee ring on the first page. This was not a flower moment. This was a line moment. She looked at me over her shoulder. Homework? Kind of, I said, flipping to a blank sheet. Us work. We sat at the kitchen table. She slid the mugs toward us, steam braiding up into the soft kitchen light. I wrote boundaries at the top of the page, then underlined it, not for flair, just to make the word heavier than the paper. My handwriting leaned left, hers leaned right. It pleased me that our letters met in the middle. I tapped the pen. School, I said. What's the boundary there? She tucked a knee up in her chair. No more jokes in parent spaces where I can hear them. Good, I said, writing. No adult commentary about our family in rooms we share. I added, if it happens, we name it and step out. She watched the ink make declarations. Step out as in, leave? Yes, I said. You don't have to stand in a room that keeps shrinking you to fit its comfort. We can leave mid-meeting, mid-sentence. We'll send an email later. Written words don't blush. Her mouth quirked. You love emails. I love evidence, I smiled. Emails build little fences where people can see them. I wrote, follow up in writing, clear, calm, specific. She tapped the table, thinking. What about online stuff? I felt the familiar unease ripple my skin. The internet is a city without streetlights. Boundary, I said, writing the word again. No fighting in comments. If we need to correct a lie, we do it once, clearly, and then we log off. She nodded, relieved. I don't want to be holding my phone like a shield. Me neither. I added, mute, block, ignore. Protect the peace we can control. We moved through more categories. Teachers, direct conversations, no triangulating through gossip. Friends. If someone brings us screenshots to stir, we say, we're not cooking that. Extended family. If they post about us without consent, we ask once, then we unfollow. It felt almost liturgical, this listing of rules, not prison bars, guardrails. I paused, pen hovering. One more, I said. Our own mouths. She raised an eyebrow. No humiliating Tracy for sport, I continued. No turning her into a campfire story to keep us warm. We can tell the truth about harm without building bonfires. Her shoulders loosened. I don't want to be that person, she said quietly. Me neither, I said, because here's the hardest truth. If we win by becoming what hurt us, we lose the part of us that needed the win. We sat with that, letting it sink past surface understanding into the bones. The kettle clicked off behind us. Somewhere in the house, a pipe ticked as it cooled, like a small engine learning how to rest. The night stretched out ordinary and kind. I flipped the paper and drew a simple box with our names inside, Linda and Sophia. Around it, I sketched a square, then another, each a little wider than the last. What's that? She asked. Layers, I said. The innermost one is just us. What we say to each other, how we treat each other, that's sacred. The next one is close friends. People who've earned access with care. Then teachers, neighbors, school. The outer layer is the public, the place where anything you feed will grow teeth. I pointed to each square. We decide what each layer gets, not the other way around. She traced the smallest box with her finger, eyes gone soft. We get the whole story, she said, almost to herself. We do, I said. We always will. We cleaned the mugs, we put away the pen. Small normal things that made the house hold still again. In the bathroom mirror, I caught my face and almost didn't recognize it. Not because it was wrecked, but because it wasn't. I looked like myself. Not the version trimmed for other people's comfort. The one that takes up her exact size and calls it correct. On the nightstand, my phone bloomed more messages. The peppermint woman, her actual name is Carol, I learned, texted, "Proud of your girl? Proud of you." A father from the back row, "Didn't speak up tonight, I regret it. If you file a report, I'll add mine." The principal, formal, fragile. "We'll be reviewing policies around respectful conduct." The teacher, "If you want a meeting with the counselor to support Sophia, I can schedule it. Apologies, offers." Administrative language learning how to say sorry. I showed a few to Sophia. Not to ask her to absolve anyone, just to let her see the shape of responses. "Do we answer now?" she asked. "We answer what's useful when we're ready," I said. "Tonight, our job is to sleep." She gave me that look again, the recalibrating one, and then smiled. "Can I write 3 lines?" she asked, surprising me. 3 lines? "For me," she said, "like rules I keep in my pocket." "Do it," I said, handing her the legal pad. She wrote, tongue peeking out at the corner of her mouth like it did when she was 6 and drawing suns with too many rays. Then she read them aloud. 1. Truth isn't mean. 2. Silence isn't peace. 3. Boundaries aren't walls. They're doors we decide who walks through. She looked up, half proud, half shy. "Too much." "Perfect," I said, feeling the word find a new place to live in me. Perfect and portable. Later, in bed, the dark felt friendly. My body did that small inventory it does at the end of a hard day. Ache in the shoulders, a hum behind the eyes, a throat that had held too much and let it out anyway. I thought about the hallway, about how a hug can be a treaty after a war no one declared, about how the opposite of humiliation isn't revenge, it's dignity. I also thought about Tracy, not to soften what she did, to understand what I would not do next. I wouldn't turn her into a hobby. I wouldn't build my identity around her failure. Our boundary didn't need her inside it. That's the quiet usefulness of a line. It removes the need for a fight. Morning came gentler than it had a right to. The kind of light that lays a hand on your shoulder and says, "You're still here." Over toast, Sophia scrolled once, then put her phone face down. "I don't want my mood to be a democracy today," she said. I laughed into my coffee. "Put that on a t-shirt." We drove to school early, both of us preferring the empty parking lot and the soft hush before the building puts on its busy voice. She adjusted her backpack straps, the letter no longer a secret weight inside. At the door, she turned. "Stay for a second." "Always," I said. We stood in the lobby where the floor still smelled faintly of yesterday's floor cleaner. The display case held its trophies up to the light like a parent who wants you to meet all their children. Sophia took a breath, the kind you take when you decide to belong to your life in public. "If anyone says anything," she said, eyes steadier than yesterday's hand, "I'll say, that's unkind and untrue, and go to class." "That's a boundary," I said, short, clear, and not a debate. She smirked. "Like you." "I learned from the best," I said, and meant her. She hugged me quick and solid, no trembling now. The door swallowed her into the hallway, and I watched the building do its weekday magic. Kids becoming students, adults becoming adults if they choose. I walked back to the car feeling taller, not because the world had shrunk, but because I had stopped hunching around it. On my lunch break, I drafted an email, not angry, precise. I named the behavior, the harm, and my expectation. I CC'd the right people. I asked for specific steps, a written code for parent conduct, a plan for moderators in meetings, a channel for reporting harm without making children do the heavy lifting. I read it aloud once to check for heat. It had warmth, not flames send. The reply arrived before I finished my sandwich. The principal thanked me for my advocacy and proposed a meeting with the counselor and assistant principal. He used words like restore and repair. I replied with words like boundaries and accountability. We were learning each other's dialects. The point wasn't perfect fluency. The point was forward. That afternoon, Sophia came home lighter, not feather light, human light. "It was okay," she said, kicking off her shoes. A few people looked, two apologized. "How did you respond?" I said thank you for saying that, and then I asked them not to repeat the behavior even if I'm not there. She grinned, feral and kind at once. "You'd be proud." "I am," I said, proud already curled and sleeping at the center of my chest. That evening we sat on the porch and let the day cool around us. The wind chime did its nonsense hymn. The neighbor's cat performed an opera for a moth. Somewhere down the block, a kid learned the trumpet one wrong note at a time, life unedited. We looked at each other and at all of it, and we didn't need to narrate. We had done enough words for 1 week. And here, because I promised I'd speak to you like you're in the room with me, here is the spine of what we learned, not as a manifesto, but as a map. Truth does not require an enemy to be strong. Boundaries do not require cruelty to hold. Dignity is not a performance, it's a posture. If you've ever been tempted to shrink yourself to make a room comfortable, ask yourself the question we wrote on our kitchen paper, the one that changed the way the air moved in our house. Who benefits when I am small? If the answer isn't me or someone I've chosen, redraw the line. And you, because these stories are only useful when they travel, have you ever stayed silent and watched the truth speak without you? How did it feel? Did it feel like losing control? Or did it feel, eventually, like being released from a job you were never hired to do? If your throat is tired from holding back storms, try a new weather report. No more forecast, only windows. We didn't humiliate Tracy. We didn't need to. We returned shame to its sender, and we kept what belonged to us. A girl's courage, a mother's steadiness, a family's right to stand in its own light. The line looks simple on paper. In practice, it shimmered like heat above asphalt. But once we drew it, once we honored it, the shimmer cooled. The road beneath it was just road again, walkable hours. Tomorrow will bring its errands and its emails and its likely awkward encounters in the cereal aisle. That's fine. We have our rules in a pocket. We have our box of layers. We have the understanding that a boundary is love performing its most boring miracle, keeping what's inside safe enough to grow. I won't end with a trumpet or a moral set to fireworks. Just this. I'll keep choosing dignity over spectacle. I'll keep teaching my daughter that bravery is not volume, and that kindness is a discipline, not a costume. And if you're the kind who needs a line to start drawing your own, borrow ours. You don't have to stand in spaces that keep shrinking you. Step out, write it down. Return what isn't yours. If that sentence fits in your pocket, keep it. If it doesn't, write one that does. Either way, make it yours. That's the point of lines. They only hold if your hand believes them. If you were sitting across from me right now, coffee gone warm, jacket half on because you're not sure if you're staying or going, I'd start with this. I am not here to sell you a happy ending. I am here to offer a usable one. Tonight didn't turn me into a new person. It reminded me of the one I already am. I used to think healing would feel like fireworks, some loud proof that pain had finally cashed out. Instead, it felt like a room with good light and a door I could open or close, ordinary, practical, mine. And if you're listening because you need a map, I'm placing a copy in your hands. Here's the part I want you to hear in your bones. Strength isn't revenge. It's truth with a steady posture. We live in a world that loves spectacle. It's louder, shinier, easier to share. But when the noise settles, we still have to live with who we were while the lights were on. I want to be the woman who chose dignity when the crowd asked for blood. I want to raise the kid who knows courage isn't volume. Maybe you've been in a room like mine. The jokes weren't jokes. The smiles had edges. You felt yourself shrinking to fit a story you didn't write. If you're there now, if your stomach lives in your throat and your hands need a job just to stop shaking, hey, breathe. Put your feet on the floor, you're still here. That's not small. That's the whole point. You asked me, well, some of you did in the comments the last time I told a hard story. How do you keep from exploding? Don't you want to fight back? The truest answer is, sometimes I do. Anger is a flare gun our bodies shoot when the sea is too big. It says, look at this. This hurts. But a flare isn't a lighthouse. It startles. It doesn't steer. What steers is a boundary. What saves is the quiet sentence that says, no farther, not here, not with me. So tonight I wrote lines, not poetry, fences. I didn't post them for applause. I built them for shelter. And I learned, again, that a boundary is not a wall locking the world out. It's a door with a lock you own. You can open, you can close, you can peek through the peephole and decide, that's not cruel, that's custodial. You are the caretaker of your life. If anyone laughs at the locks on your door, remember who has to sleep there. Pattern interrupt. Yes, looking right at you. What if the most radical thing you could do this week is walk out of one room that keeps you small? Not argue, not explain. Just stand up, say, this isn't kind, and leave. Could you try it once? Could you keep your dignity like a fragile bowl and refuse to set it down for an applause you'll never get? When the noise of tonight dies down, there are emails to send, real ones, calm, precise, specific. This is what happened. This is the harm. This is what I expect next. Evidence is boring. That's why it works. It gives your future self something to stand on when your present self is tired. It tells institutions they're not dealing with a ghost. It tells you that you believe yourself enough to write it down. And there will be people, let me say this so you can recognize them, who confuse your clarity with aggression, who tell you boundaries are mean, who want you to make your case in a tone that flatters their comfort. You do not have to audition for kindness. You can be firm and decent at the same time. You can say no and still wish someone well. That's not mixed, that's mature. Maybe you're not a parent. Maybe your battlefield is a workplace, a sibling group chat, a pew you've warmed for years. Pain isn't picky, it just wants a host. The details vary, but the math is the same. Humiliation subtracts you, truth returns you. Just because a room gave you a microphone doesn't mean you owe it a performance. Sometimes the bravest mic drop is silence, followed by a step toward the exit. Let me give you 3 little sentences that fit in a pocket. They're not magic, they're maintenance. That's unkind and untrue. Short, specific, not a debate, use it once. Repeat only to document. I'll continue this conversation when everyone is respectful. That word, when, is a hinge. It makes dignity a condition, not a plea. I'm stepping out. You don't need a closing argument. Leave, then write. I promised myself I wouldn't make Tracy a character that props up my courage. That's a boundary too. You're not obligated to carry the people who tried to cut your hands. You are allowed to place them outside the layers of access. To forgive without forgetting your address. To wish them well from far away. Distance is not hatred. It's hygiene. Now, because this is a channel that breathes with you, let me ask, where does it still pinch? Is it the meeting you'll walk into tomorrow? The kitchen table where someone uses history like a hammer? The comment thread that pulls you into a fight that eats your sleep? Name it below. Not to collect sympathy tokens, to collect language. We get braver faster when we share words that work. Another interruption, gentler this time. If you made it this far, stay with me for one more minute. Put your name in the comments with one boundary you plan to draw this week. It can be tiny. No more replying after 9 p.m. No more letting jokes land unchecked. No more sitting in the middle when the end seat is by the door. Say it out loud. Watch how your body feels just typing it. And if you're someone who watched tonight and thought, I stood there too, I want your story. Not the sensational version, the useful one. How did you hold your ground without becoming what hurt you? What sentence did you keep in your pocket? Somebody scrolling at 2 a.m. will find your comment and breathe easier because you left a breadcrumb. I owe you more than a bow. I owe you tools. So here's my simple toolkit, the one I'll keep sharpening. Witness before you react. Take a beat. Ask, what is actually happening? Name the harm, not the person. That comment humiliates. Stop. Lands better than you're a monster and is easier to defend later. Exit when respect evaporates. You are not a hostage of manners. Document calmly. Screenshots, dates, direct quotes. Your future self will thank you. Follow up once, in writing, with a clear ask. Then let the process do work you don't have to. None of this is glamorous. That's the quiet beauty of it. The algorithm likes drama. Your nervous system likes dignity. Choose your audience. Before I close, I want to speak directly to the version of you that's 12, because she's still in there. The one who believed the room must be right because it was full and loud and certain. She didn't have the tools yet. That's not a failure. That's a timestamp. Tonight we give her what she needed. A hand on her back, a sentence in her pocket, a door that opens. Tell her she wasn't too sensitive. Tell her she was picking up a signal no one else wanted to translate. Tell her she isn't late to her life. What I learned in that hallway is something I want you to borrow. Compassion is not the opposite of consequence. I can hold both. I can hope Tracy learns something and also insist she does it far from my child. I can prevent a bonfire and still be a lighthouse. We do not have to scorch the earth to grow a garden, but we do have to fence it. Here's the statement I'm pinning to my own heart. Power rooted in humiliation rots. Power rooted in truth feeds. I want to be fed, not famous. I want my daughter to recognize her reflection without needing an audience to clap for it. I want my home to be the kind of safe that makes kindness possible outside it. That's what we're building, not a stage, a shelter. If this helps, if you felt your spine grow half an inch while you listened, stay. I'm not asking you to subscribe to me. I'm asking you to subscribe to yourself. But if you want more stories like this, practical, imperfect, honest, hit follow, so you don't have to go looking the next time your courage needs company. And please drop your boundary sentence below. Someone will borrow it tonight. One last pattern interrupt. Some homework you can actually finish. Write a 3-line pledge and keep it near your keys. Mine says, truth isn't mean. Silence isn't peace. Boundaries aren't walls. Read it before the next meeting, before the next family brunch, before the next joke. See how it changes your posture. I told you at the start I wouldn't sell you fireworks. I won't. But I will hand you a match, not to burn it all down, to light your own porch, so that when you come home from the hard rooms, you have somewhere warm and ordinary to place your tired, holy self, a place that doesn't shrink you, a place that speaks your right name, a place with doors you own. If you've been through something like this, if you've ever walked out of a room-sized lie and into the smaller, truer space of your life, tell us what the first step felt like. Tell us what scared you and what surprised you. Tell us what went wrong and how you adjusted. Don't worry about neatness. We'll make a mess together and clean it up with gentleness. And if you're not ready to talk yet, you're still welcome. Sit with us. Listen. Borrow language until you find your own. You don't owe us a performance. You don't owe anyone an explanation that costs your peace. We will still be here when you are ready. Door open, light on. I'm signing off with the sentence that has carried me through the noise and back to myself. Strength is not in revenge. It's in truth and courage. May your courage be quiet and sturdy. May your truth be kind and unflinching. May your lines keep what's inside safe enough to grow. If this found you at the right time, stay a minute longer. Read a few stories in the comments. Leave yours when you can. And take this with you into the rooms that haven't learned your name yet. You are allowed to draw the line. I'll see you soon. And I'll still be rooting for you, especially in the ordinary.